Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and welcome to A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. U.S. President Donald Trump terminates all trade talks with Canada. A Russian attack kills 2 and injures 17 in Ukraine's Odessa. Lithuania quits global landmine ban, citing Russia's threat. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a strong response to Canada's planned digital tax. He announced the immediate suspension of trade talks between the two countries and said new tariffs on Canadian goods would be introduced in the coming days.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Friday that he is immediately suspending trade talks with Canada over its planned digital tax targeting American technology companies. He called the tax a direct attack on his country and said new tariffs on Canadian goods would be announced next week. Canada's planned 3% digital services tax would apply retroactively from 2022 to companies such as Amazon, Meta, Google and Apple. Trump's decision cast doubt on the agreement reached during the G7 summit, where both sides had pledged to finalize a deal within 30 days.
No, they put a tax on companies that were American companies that they shouldn't, a very severe tax. And yeah, I guess they could remove it. They will, but it doesn't matter to me. We have all the cards. You know, we do a lot of business with Canada, but relatively little. They do most of their businesses with us.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the administration may launch an investigation into the tax, which could lead to retaliatory tariffs worth around $2 billion. The Canadian government has stated it remains willing to continue negotiations.
No, look, we'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interests of Canadians. It's a negotiation.
According to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Washington is currently engaged in trade talks with 18 countries and aims to conclude deals with at least 10 to 12 of them by September 1st. The U.S. is also actively negotiating with the European Union, India and Japan. Bessent added that the US and China have expanded an agreement on the supply of rare earth elements, and exports of these critical materials are expected to resume.
U.S. President Donald Trump has strongly denied media reports claiming his administration considered offering Iran $30 billion to support its civilian nuclear energy program. Trump dismissed the reports as a hoax in a Truth Social post, calling them fake news and denying any such proposal was discussed. Outlets including CNN and NBC News reported that the United States had considered unfreezing Iranian assets in exchange for halting uranium enrichment. The reports come amid ongoing indirect talks between the United States and Iran over Tehran's nuclear program, which Iran insists is for peaceful purposes. In our last episode of Inside Politics talk show, our very own Anastasia Lavrina discussed the dangers of Iran's threat to close the Strait of Hormuz with Felipe Fernandes, a political scientist from Matosinhos, Portugal. Felipe explained that if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, the United States and Israel are likely to launch an attack on Iran.
For instance, we know that a full blockade would surely provoke U.S. military retaliation, especially if at this given moment Iran would use some of its proxies in the region. We know, for instance, that the Houthis could play a role in the blockade, and if so, then it would lead for sure for a U.S. and possibly even Israeli military retaliation. We know that maintaining a blockade is a very, very intense challenge that maybe Iran could not be even thinking of doing, for instance, due to the U.S. and U.S. allied naval forces present in the region, that they could most likely, with some, neutralize Iranian forces rather quickly. And so this long-term closure could be militarily unsustainable for Iran. Now, on the other hand, this could be also a way of engaging more diplomatically when it comes to the U.S., especially if we are looking for a partly and temporary blockade, or even if, for all it's worth, the Supreme National Security Council of Iran could refuse this endorsement from the parliament, and so the U.S. would have more than sufficient reasons to go into the negotiation table without having military intervention, and even so, because the U.S. presented to the Western Hemisphere, if we want, their military intervention in Iran at Iranian nuclear facilities as a major success. So it would be rather difficult to easily justify another military intervention within this framework if Iran does not use any of its proxies, or if Iran does not go with a full blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
President Donald Trump has predicted a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas could be reached within a week. Speaking at an event on Friday, Trump stated that discussions are ongoing to end the conflict in Gaza. Hamas has offered to release the remaining hostages, but Israel insists on disarming the group. Trump's comments come after recent U.S. and Israel airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, and a ceasefire between Israel and Iran went into effect earlier this week. Israeli officials are set to visit Washington next week to discuss Gaza, Iran, and peace prospects. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on June 28th in Minsk that Russia and Ukraine have agreed to hold a third round of negotiations following the exchange of prisoners of war and the return of fallen soldiers' bodies. The exact time and location of the meeting haven't yet been determined, but both sides are ready to continue the talks in Istanbul. Defense Minister of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, stated that Kiev is working to promote a meeting at the leadership level and expects to begin substantive dialogue once humanitarian issues are resolved. Military intelligence spokesperson Andriy Yusov noted that, despite challenges, the prisoner exchange process under the Istanbul Agreement is progressing steadily. It should be recalled that during the June 2nd meeting, the parties agreed to exchange at least 1,000 prisoners of war and for Russia to hand over the bodies of 6,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Ukrainian officials report that 2 people were killed and 17 injured early Saturday morning after a Russian strike hit a residential building in the city of Odessa. According to Odessa Mayor Hennady Turhanov's Telegram channel, rescuers found the bodies of a couple who died when a drone struck their apartment. At least 17 other civilians were injured, including 3 children. Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities have intensified dramatically in May and June. Lithuania has officially withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention, citing growing security risks from Russia. This decision follows a similar move by Poland this week and signals a shift in defense strategies among NATO and EU members. As tensions rise in Eastern Europe, the future of the treaty, which bans anti-personnel landmines, is now under question.
Lithuania has formally withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention, citing rising security risks from Russia. The decision was made official on Friday, with Lithuania notifying the United Nations that it will no longer be bound by the international treaty banning anti-personnel landmines. The withdrawal will take effect in 6 months. Lithuania's move follows similar steps by neighboring Poland, which also announced its departure from the treaty this week. Both countries, alongside Latvia, Estonia, and Finland, all NATO and EU members have raised concerns about the growing military threats posed by Russia, particularly as tensions escalate in Eastern Europe. The Ottawa Convention, formerly known as the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, was adopted in 1997 and came into force in 1999. It prohibits the use, production, and stockpiling of anti-personnel landmines and aims to eliminate these weapons globally. More than 160 countries have signed the treaty, committing to destroy existing landmine stockpiles. However, major military powers like Russia, the United States, China, India, and Pakistan have not joined the agreement, leaving a gap in global compliance. The recent withdrawals by Lithuania and Poland signal a critical shift in the future of the Ottawa Convention. As these countries adapt their defense strategies in response to increasing security threats, the effectiveness of the treaty in addressing modern military challenges is now in question. With several NATO and EU members reconsidering their commitment, the Convention faces growing pressure to evolve in line with current geopolitical realities.
A dangerous heat wave is gripping much of Europe, bringing record-breaking temperatures, triggering wildfires and putting emergency services on high alert. From Turkey to the Iberian Peninsula, countries are battling both the intense heat and the growing risk to public safety.
Europe is sweltering under a powerful heat wave, with temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius in many regions and wildfires erupting across the continent. An extreme heat sparked fires in Turkish cities Izmir, Bursa, Tekirdağ, Sakarya and Adana. Firefighting crews were deployed, but efforts were marred by tragedy when a firefighting plane crashed in Adana during a water collection mission. Rescue operations are underway. Greece is facing its first major heat wave of the year, with inland temperatures expected to peak at 41 degrees Celsius. Many residents in Athens fled to the coast to cool down.
We are all from Pennsylvania, and we've never really experienced a heat wave like this before, so we're all very hot, and all of our skin is very sensitive to the sun. Like me, I had sun poisoning on my hands from the cruise ship in the Mediterranean Sea and the heat.
In Spain and Portugal, authorities issued heat alerts ahead of expected highs up to 44 degrees Celsius. Portugal placed most of the country on yellow alert, with orange warnings in inland areas. Lisbon could reach 42 degrees Celsius by Sunday. Residents in southern France sought relief from the scorching sun on Saturday as a heat wave settled over the region, expected to persist for several days. In Perpignan, temperatures surged to 40 degrees Celsius, leaving parks deserted, while nearby Roussillon recorded 36 degrees by mid-morning. The heat is forecast to intensify further across the country, with some areas expected to see temperatures soar to 40 degrees Celsius. Emergency services across the region are on high alert, preparing for potential surges in heat-related illnesses. Vulnerable groups, including children, the elderly, and those with chronic conditions, are being urged to take extra precautions.
Azerbaijan is demanding accountability after 2 of its citizens were killed and several others injured in what it calls a violent and unjustified raid by Russian security forces in Yekaterinburg. The operation targeted Azerbaijani households and has sparked outrage in Baku over the treatment of its nationals.
Azerbaijan has strongly condemned what it calls a brutal and unjustified operation by Russian security forces in the city of Yekaterinburg. During the raid on Friday, 2 Azerbaijani nationals were killed, several others injured, and at least 9 were detained. The deadly operation, led by the Russian Federal Security Service, targeted over 10 homes belonging to Azerbaijani families, raising serious concerns about ethnic profiling and the use of excessive force. The victims, Ziadin and Hussein Safarov, were from a well-known Azerbaijani family, originally from Agdam. Their brother, Shakir, confirmed their deaths and is arranging to repatriate their bodies. Several other family members and compatriots remain in custody, with reports suggesting over 60 Azerbaijanis may have been detained. One of those detained and later released described being beaten and humiliated by security forces who allegedly entered without warrants and confiscated valuables, including money and gold. He also claimed that both he and his father were assaulted during the raid. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Russia's Chargé d'Affaires in Baku and issued a strong protest, demanding an immediate and transparent investigation. Officials accused Russian law enforcement of acting with disregard for legal standards and called the killings unacceptable. While the Russian Foreign Ministry claims the raids were part of an ongoing investigation into serious past crimes, allegedly involving Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin, it has offered little clarity on the deaths or the violence used during the operation. Azerbaijan has called on Moscow to hold those responsible accountable and to guarantee the safety and legal rights of Azerbaijani citizens living in Russia.
To Central Asia now, around 950 people have been evacuated after a mountain lake overflowed in the Issyk-Ata district of Kyrgyzstan's Chuy region, near the capital Bishkek. According to the Ministry of Emergency Situations, the overflow of the Takir Tor mountain lake triggered flash flooding, destroying a bridge between the villages of Almalu and Kebekbi. Authorities deployed 114 personnel to clear and reopen roads blocked by the floodwaters. Residents from at-risk areas were safely evacuated and temporarily relocated to schools, mosques and cultural centers. The floodwaters continue to flow along the riverbed, but no casualties or damage have been reported. Kazakhstan's Finance Minister Madi Takiyev has presented the 2024 budget execution report. According to the minister, the country's economy recorded a 4.88% growth in gross domestic product, driven mainly by the development of the non-oil sector and stable fiscal policies. At the same time, the inflation rate declined to 8.6% compared to the previous year. One of the indicators of financial stability, the National Fund's assets increased to $66.2 billion. The minister also noted that despite minor shortfalls in revenue collection, the fight against the shadow economy brought an additional $2.43 billion into the state budget. Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze says the country is ready to rebuild its strategic partnership with the United States, guided by a roadmap of mutual benefit. Speaking during his annual address to Parliament, Kobakhidze noted diplomatic progress, including the appointment of Georgia's new ambassador to Washington, as signs of genuine reset in bilateral ties. The Prime Minister also reaffirmed Georgia's ambition to join the European Union by 2030. While acknowledging tensions with some EU officials, he stressed that Georgia is committed to taking all necessary steps toward membership, urging a fair and constructive approach from Brussels. The 50th Jubilee meeting of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Council of Foreign Ministers was held online under Azerbaijan's chairmanship. According to Azerbaijan's Foreign Ministry, member states discussed progress on key projects, ties with the EU, and deepening regional economic cooperation across sectors such as transport, energy, and trade. The meeting also reviewed collaboration with BSEC's related bodies and adopted new recommendations for future initiatives. BSEC states thanked Azerbaijan for its leadership as the chairmanship passed to Bulgaria. Azerbaijani media representatives have recently completed a visit to China to strengthen media relations between the two countries. This visit took place in Shanghai and Beijing, offering insights into the Chinese media sector. Here are the highlights from the trip.
The visit started in Shanghai at the 30th Shanghai TV Festival, a major event in Asia's media calendar. Azerbaijani delegates met representatives from key Chinese media organizations, including Shanghai Media Group. The discussions centered around media trends, innovative content approaches, and potential collaborations. The delegation then traveled to Beijing, where meetings took place with several leading media organizations within China Media Group, including Xinhua News Agency, People's Daily, and China Global Television Network, a key international broadcaster under CMG. These interactions provided deeper understanding of digital journalism practices, broadcasting techniques, and production methods in China. One of the main outcomes was the signing of a memorandum of cooperation in radio and television broadcasting. This agreement outlines practical steps for content sharing between Azerbaijani and Chinese media, supporting greater cultural and informational exchanges. A News Executive Director Rufat Hamzayev spoke to CGTN, discussing the practical benefits of working more closely with Chinese media organizations. He highlighted that cooperation with CGTN and other CMG entities could expand the international audience for Azerbaijani media content.
We see a great opportunity between the two media outlets, and we are open to any multiple forms of cooperation. We are open to multiple cooperation. It could be like exchanging the ideas, exchanging the docuseries, or maybe collaborate in some projects as well. And we truly appreciate the possibility from CGTN side for A News. And I think in the near future, we will also look through the possible agreement between the two media outlets as well.
As the Chinese proverb goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This visit represents the initial step toward long-term cooperation between Azerbaijan and China in the media field.
That's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.